This is the Gospel Revolution.
Since you're knocking on the door, you're begging to come in, yeah. Unaware that all the while love's been knocking from within. You are the love you see, a perfect yet unique, righteous, holy.
Here's the founder and president of the Gospel Revolution, Michael Lilborn Williams.
Thank you very much, Daniel Thomas Rouse, for that wonderful greeting. How nice. And it goes with a sweet face, too.
Nice. Well, it's good to see you on this wonderful day.
Well, you also, and on this wonderful day, I'm going to make an announcement about this show before we go any further. You're not even going to believe what's about to happen to you. You are first going to have to still put up with Daniel and I because we refuse to change. But the other thing is you're about to hear a teaching that as far as we are able to research and tell, number one, of course, it's going to be one of the teachings of Christ. But this may be the most definitive one as far as having an answer in the Bible itself and in Paul's teachings that we've ever gone through.
Mm.
And it is the one I have never heard a single person be able to address except through the knowledge of good and evil and blah, 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 blah. But as Daniel and I were going through this, an explosion happened. And immediately, you're going to be blown away. I'm blown away this morning. I can hardly contain myself. But it's pledge drive, and if you don't give at least $5,000, we're not going to. This is going to come with a default button that shuts it off if we have not received your check.
So go to www.gospelrevolution.com right now. Yes, we have kicked off the pledge drive. And of course, as always, Jeff is standing by eagerly waiting for you to give him a call at 321-220-4373. Once a quarter, we approach you about helping us financially reach the world with the gospel. And you might say, what in the world are you guys doing? Well, just listen to the podcast. And if you can hear what we are sharing, and I think everybody listening to this, to some degree, has been impacted by the gospel. And I, for one, as being one here recording this today, am saying that my life was changed by the gospel revolution. My life has been saved. My two girls have been saved they were headed to a life full of Christianity and hellfire and judgment and a personal Jesus, and you fill in the blank.
Yeah.
And my family has been redeemed. And it's all because of Michael Lilborn Williams, Don Barris Bartlett, Glenn Klein, the Gospel Revolution. Thank you. And if what you can do can just help me keep this for me and my little girls, I will forever be thankful and grateful. But I know there's a whole world out there who need to hear this gospel. And you can help simply throw a few dollars at Jeff Robertson, 321-220-4373.
Folks, we are right now, the big craze in investments is AI. Fusion is not on the charts yet because you really don't have a company, even though there's billions being placed into fusion energy around the world by governments themselves and private enterprise. The thing that right now is the massive, massive change that is, it's weird because there's no new building going up. There's no thing happening, but AI is now being incorporated into, and just you're going to have to just drop fear. It's like my generation before me; they were afraid to answer the telephone. So, yes, there's things that can be done, are already being done with AI, but there's not been a single invention or progress that has not been misused. Don't let the misuse and abuse blind you to what's happening in this world of AI. It's going to change our world. It is, I would say, at this point, it is about in the single digits of impact into our lives, and already, I mean, all you have to do is turn on your phone, and AI's like, "Hello, I'm here." It's like, "Demon, come out in Jesus' name." But what this is going to mean in the organization of information is just beyond. It's not only accessible for us, it is able to put together information from around the world on a single subject in a microsecond. And so but what I'm trying to say is that's where we are as far as investments are concerned. If you want an investment, please find something connected to AI and read up on it and get involved, because this is going to pass Microsoft and Apple and all of the technologies. This is a technology that is going to revamp all technologies on the face of the earth. But that's where we are in the gospel. You want to invest in something that's going to change the whole world and make AI look like it is nothing. Make fusion energy look like it's nothing. There's got to be a mindset that's going to cause all of this stuff to work and bring sanity instead of insanity. And there is nothing else except the gospel that is going to cause this to happen. Our ability to know is godlike now. It is our ability to know things is godlike. And we shouldn't be surprised at that, because that was God's intent from the moment that he said, "Let there be light." I'm just already wound up now. You would the things that we have in the pipeline, the things that Ethan is working on. Oh my God! I mean, poor Ethan couldn't stop his brain last night, and I'm with my grandson, and there's this and blah 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 blah. And then I've got another GR sending me questions, blah, 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 and what about that? And what about this? And what about that? Blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm right with my grandson right now, blah, 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 blah. And believe me, all those blah, 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 blahs are wonderful. I'm just blown away that people are so freaking deeply involved. And because of being so deeply involved, something happened in the after hours. I keep track of the market. I finally got enough money put together where I could invest some. So I even watch aftermarket, to see what's happening. And, but aftermarket, after Daniel and I did all of this research, and it just unloaded on us in, I mean, a jaw-dropping understanding that you are going to hear today. And then Daniel calls me this morning after we talked about how this is a particular part of it is, oh man, this explains it so well. And then Daniel, we get on the phone this morning, he says, "Oh, I guess what I did. I read a little further." And the very verse that is the context that we're going to be referring to is the exact quote of that verse. Unbelievable. And so what you're going to hear today about a teaching of Christ that has never been understood I am telling you, this teaching of Christ has never been understood. Now, we're going to be a whole lot of you claim, oh, yes, I knew that. But you didn't. So give it up. And where this is validated is going to blow your mind. So that's what you're becoming a part of. You don't want this gospel revolution to pass by and say, I could have been a part of that. You don't want AI to go by and say, I could have been a part of that. Because there's Microsoft millionaires out there now who said, I was a part of that.
Yeah.
And they've got millions of dollars in the bank and they never did a freaking thing in their life, and we're not here to teach you how to make money. You decide whether or not you want to invest in anything at all or AI. I'm trying to teach my grandson desperately about money. And so he's my business partner in all this. I talk to my 10-year-old about what we're doing with our money. And I'm making him learn what the value of something is and what a quality is over a quantity. And we had a little session last night about quality and quantity and how to read a chart. And but we do this like 2-minute increments because number one, he absorbs that fast, and number two, his attention span is no longer than that. So don't be concerned that your 10-year-old doesn't listen more than 2 minutes, because their ability to absorb during that 2 minutes is off the chain. So anyway, we want you to be a part of this just so you can say you were. Because folks, I don't care what's going on out there. We have people around this world who have decided to judge God. And those ministries are Mirror Bible and Grace Conferences, Andre Rabe, Dr. Murray. Goodness, we could go on and on. And the thing that all of these have in common, while there's many differences, they don't all get along, nor do they all like each other's teaching. But the one thing they do is say that God was never angry. And so what has happened in this is that these folks, and they're wonderful people. We're not discounting these people's character or nature at all. Have nothing to do with that at all. I wouldn't have a part to do with it if somebody tried to involve me if they knew something horrible. But what I'm doing is trying to keep you not judge me when you find out about things about me. So anyway, I'm covering my own butt. So.
and to cover your butt so that you don't get a call from Canada, not Grace Conferences. We love Grace Conferences, Grace Global.
Oh, did I say Grace Conferences?
Grace Conferences, yeah.
Oh, Jesus. See?
Vic will be on the phone. Hey.
He will indeed. Thank you. So, yes, Grace Global. But what is it that is so wrong about this? They insist God was never angry. And what they've done is decide to judge God based on the knowledge of good and evil. We asked one of the graduates from Grace, Global Grace, about if God was angry, and just open up your mind to say what ifs. And if God was angry, if he did any of these things in the Old Testament, could he still be holy and righteous? And the response, Daniel, was,
I don't think so.
I don't think so. That sent a shudder through me, because to know someone as precious and wonderful as that individual, and then to know that there is an element of self-righteousness that is unidentifiable and is so deep that they have taken on themselves the right to judge God based on the knowledge of good and evil. Now, they may be right, and they may be wrong. Let's step back and say that.
Right.
But either way, right or wrong, they are judging God based on the knowledge of good and evil. Period. So, number one, for you to judge God's righteousness and holiness based on the knowledge of good and evil, shouldn't that tell you there's something wrong with the way you're thinking? We do not judge God based on what we know think, may have thought that God has done. The one thing that we do know is what God has done. He did it and wrapped it all up in the cross of Jesus Christ. And we're not waiting around for Jesus to get us a parking place at Walmart. Even if we land dying of cancer in the hospital bed, we're not waiting for Jesus to come heal us. Now, I know that's rough, but you've already experienced it. What makes it so difficult to accept the reality that Jesus doesn't come and take care of things for you?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I grew up with the little angel on the wall, going across the bridge, and the little girl reaching down to get the flour out of the little pond, and the angels got her dressed by the tail of her dress. There, just smiling, big old wings flapping, and her by defying all gravity and not falling into the water. That was my concept that I grew up with on the wall. And everything that I experienced in life absolutely defied that concept.
Mm-hmm.
And now a peace that passes all understanding. Lisa McPeak, goodness gracious, one of our newest. She's just an old timer now. She's, Lord, I'm learning from Lisa every day. And God, how that girl has grown, and the way life, the understanding of life, and she is just, the thing she's overwhelmed with is, I'm at peace. I learned little bits about her. I know that she is veteran. Goodness gracious, there's just so many ones. She's an artist, and I just keep learning these little pieces about her, which was just a name, just a few months ago. But she listens to everything that we say and questions everything that we say and has comments about them that causes what we have said to be clearer. Because this, folks, you may think it's just rhetoric, but we are co-laborers together in this. And if we're going to be co-laborers, then part of that will include some money.
Mm-hmm.
So we appreciate your help.
So once again, go to www.gospelrevolution.com, hit the donate button. You will find several different ways that you can donate on there. PayPal, our mailing address, as well as Jeff's phone number, 321-220-4373. We are just so thankful and grateful that you will choose to be a part of this. And thank you for, in whatever way you can. As Michael stated last week, our goal on this pledge drive is $12,000. So we appreciate your help in getting us to that point, as well as raising our monthly support. So if you would consider during this time, would be a great time to consider becoming a monthly and providing a monthly pledge. And you can do that through PayPal, or you can talk to Jeff and he can set that up for you too.
And I personally, I want to thank you guys. I'm 72 in August. And yesterday I was 40. I don't know how the hell this happened. But I'm 72 August the 16th, and that will require a birthday. See, birthday gifts before 72 are optional. After they are mandatory. All right. So, but if anybody's wondering which direction might, you either become a crusty, mean old man as you get older, or you get mellow and sweet. I think everybody sees which way this is going already. Because this is fun. Goodness, having all the limits taken off. But you guys have chosen. I've been in the process of this gospel revolution. I've been so bankrupted. I had a dream about it last night, actually. In the dream, I had no shoes. It was cold outside, and I was having to figure out, people were having to try to figure out how I was going to, I had clothes, and I had clothes on, but it was just something. It's like, you know what? If you don't have shoes, you just walk in the snow without shoes, And it wasn't like in the dream I was going through this, oh my God, I don't have shoes. But in the dream, which is not the way I would handle it at all. But in the dream, it was like, this is what you do when you don't have shoes and there's snow on the ground. You walk in the snow, right? But you guys have chosen to bring me out of that. I was destitute. To have a place to live 20 years ago, approximately 20 years ago, to have a place to stay, I had to show up at people's house as a visitor and not let them know that if I wasn't there, I would be sleeping in a car that was donated to me, that was given to me by one of my friends. And on that particular trip, I drove all the way to Florida and became a cook, meal preparation, and physical trainer for Roberts Liardon for a room that was about 7 by 10 and a single bed in it and a dresser. And boy, was I ever glad to have that. That was part of my payment for training him. And I don't remember how long I did that. But since that time, you guys have been wonderful to me personally. I've tried not to add any personal element into the needs of the gospel revolution, but I just cannot tell you. Oh, if you've not been through it, there's no way to explain it. I do not struggle about money anymore. And I am just so grateful. Oh my gosh. But I do know how to live. Goodness gracious, if I got shoes walking through the snow, I got it made, right? All right. So I just wanted to get that personal note in it, is that you guys you rescued my life because the teaching of the gospel. Goodness, Jack Stewart, please get Jack Stewart's book. It was published in 1989 called The Legalist. I've used to advertise it all the time. I checked online. It is still there. The only man in 1989 and 1990 that taught anything. And if anybody else was teaching, please hear me. If you went to a school that touts grace, show me what they were teaching about the difference between law and grace in 1989 and 1990. Because Jack Stewart is the only other human being that I knew at the time on planet Earth who lived in Indianapolis, just 2.5 hours from me, who was teaching the difference between law and grace and published this book. He was so assaulted because of the simplicity of this book. He was a man that showed up at Norval Hayes meetings and things like that. And this man, I'm not going to tell you the story again right now, but I drove over there, and what a tragic situation that I observed, and came to a realization that altered my understanding of the pursuit of truth forever. And I got to what was to them and to me the last inventory of the legalist. And now, man, I cannot believe it. The thing has been published again. And Jack Stewart was absolutely convinced that the couple of boxes that I carried out of the basement and sat in my vehicle, he thought for sure that was it. And one of his last comments to me was that he wished he had never published the book at all.
Wow.
So this is not an easy journey with what we're up against. And does it upset me to see people who have known the gospel and now have gone to these mystic, unbelievable, let's deny everything that the Hebrew scriptures say so that we can force a particular view onto people because our conscience has decided that God is this way or that way, or has been that way or this way. And if folks, if you can find a verse for it, we'll go with you. Find the teaching on it. Find the teaching on your position and show it to us. And I beg people to do that all the time. Just, sure. I mean, I have people tell me all of their insights and stuff. I think they're great. Just because I don't know it doesn't mean it's not true. but you're going to have to teach it to me in the scriptures.
Mm.
And that's the only thing. That's the only thing that we require of ourselves and others. And Daniel has become a master at this. And I get mad at him all the time for just at the last minute, just dropping a bomb. I understand now what people got mad at me about. Mike, you just come in and you just drop a bomb on everybody and walk out. And it's like, what does that mean? Now I know Daniel does it to me all the time. So, but it's a wonderful explosion. And this gospel revolution is an explosion around the world. And just like AI is going on right now, but nobody knows about it. Nobody's aware. But honey, you're not hiding from it. And nobody's going to hide from this gospel revolution. And we are not going to keep our mouths shut when people are saying ignorant things like that God was never angry in the Old Testament. People who go on to these folks' sites and ask even questions about it, they get blocked immediately. Why? Because they have not a leg to stand on to make such a ridiculous statement. That's why.
I got the gospel in me. I got the gospel in me. I got the gospel in me. Yeah. I got the gospel in me. I got the gospel in me. I got the gospel in me.
Well, Michael, as we continue our teachings on the teachings and commandments of Christ, I looked at our list this morning, and I think if we stay on schedule, we are going to do these teachings right up into our next conference. And the week that we end these teachings, the conference will kick off.
Oh my gosh. It's almost like somebody was running this show around here.
Yeah. So, and again, we haven't announced the dates yet. We're still working on all the final details, but one of the first weekends of September, we'll get that information to you soon. We'll be coming at you with a great conference, and we are heavily in research process on that right now. And I got to tell you, you're in for it.
Oh, unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable.
Yep. That's all we'll tell you now. But this week is a teaching and command of Christ. And according to this website that we have been following, which means that also we are approaching just a couple more weeks, I should say 2 months, you will find out whose list we have been working from. And so stay tuned for that, because that's going to be an eye-opener too. But probably for our GRs, it's not going to be too big of a surprise. But this week's commandment of Christ is to await his return, the second coming of Christ.
Wow.
And it is out of Matthew 24, which is a chapter that Christianity has used to tote the tribulation, to talk about the rapture, to talk about the end of the world. And all of these things are in this, really summed up in this one chapter. And I think we're going to hit some high points of that today to show you exactly what Christ was talking about. But here in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 42 through 44 are the key verses that they use in this teaching on this website. Watch therefore, for you know not what hour your Lord does come. But know this, that if the good man of the house had known in which watch the thief would come, he would have watched and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore, be ye also ready, for in such an hour as you think not, the Son of Man cometh.
All right, Daniel. So this is Matthew 24. And what verse did you start reading in?
In verse 42.
In verse 42. So let's back up. We have to.
Beep, beep,
and
beep, beep.
and let's establish the framework in which 42 and on down has been predicated upon.
Mm-hmm.
So Matthew, I totally misunderstood chapter until the Gospel Revolution. I'm telling you, nobody taught on this, folks. Everybody used these verses. This is the end of the world chapter. And you can see that the continuation of the subject in in verse 42 is still about the end of the world, right?
Right.
All right. So to allow this to be in context in verse 42, we must reestablish what chapter 1, verse 1 until there goes to. I think we'd only have to go through 17 verses to establish this. But this is the chapter that we started teaching on decades ago, that what the disciples saw, and as it starts out, and Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple.
Mm.
So the context of this is that Jesus had just left the temple, and the disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. I've often wondered, did they think he needed a tour or something? I mean,
Well, I actually read once that during this time there was big construction that was happening, and it was over several decades that this was happening. And when Christ was there, it was the final time, and so they were kind of showing off.
Wow.
Hey, look at this brand new building here, this brand new building there.
Yeah, because Jesus's ministry took place out in the countryside,
Mm-hmm.
and only occasionally did he come into Jerusalem. But his ideas were so fought against by the establishment in Jerusalem that to get to teach, he had to go out. To keep from getting killed for what he was saying, he had to go stand out in the pasture and speak. So, so that's the functionality of this chapter. Then Jesus's response to them was, "See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." All right. So for all of our 70 AD years, and not one stone was left thrown down. And I know they have a way of sidestepping this, but the fact of it is that there is part of the temple still there.
Mm-hmm.
And there is stones left on top of each other. It's called the Wailing Wall.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm right. By this time, Jesus had already re-identified the temple. And Jesus said, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it back up again." Now, we're not left to wonder what that meant, because it follows with a verse that says, "This said he concerning his own body and his own death."
Yeah.
All right. So we know that Jesus, and what we've learned through the Hebrew scriptures, is everything that was a what became a who.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus explained how this what became a who. So no longer from this point can you read through this and try to figure out what was going to happen to the physical temple. That what happened to the physical temple from this point forward is completely irrelevant. It fulfills nothing. It does nothing. And if it does fulfill scripture, you're going to have to identify a physical event that the Romans fulfilled scriptures, not Jesus. And I'm sorry, can't go there with you. Romans did not fulfill any scripture. Jesus Christ fulfilled all scripture and all prophecy.
That's good preaching.
I'm telling you, I'm just real impressed with myself too. I don't think I should have to walk in the snow with no shoes on. Besides that, I got my gospel of peace shoes on, right? So this goes then into, and I am trying to get through this quickly, but it's vitally important that we know where 42 picks up as far as the subject is concerned. Jesus lets them know that the end of the world is coming. So this is verse 1, and then verse 2 is every stone is going to be torn down. Then verse 3, they are already at the Mount of Olives. Again, Jesus had to go outside the Jerusalem area, inside Jerusalem, to do his teachings because he was under constant threat. And they ask him, so based on what you said, tell us when the end of the world will come. because the destruction of the temple was the end of the world to them.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because of end time preachers, they read 4 words, end of the world. Oh my God. This is about the future, and we're going to, oh man, and Gog's going to come from Magog, and the bear's going to do this, and all of Israel's going to be under attack, and oh man, I mean, how many second coming warnings have I been through in 72 years? Daniel, young pup that he is, has been through several himself.
Yep.
You know, I am mad at you. That's right. I just get mad about everything anymore. So to heck with this sweet old man thing. Jesus. And Jesus said, take heed that no man deceive you. Well, guess what? Everybody deceived us about this statement. Jesus goes on to say, what is not signs of the coming? You're going to have wars and rumors of wars, and life's going to happen. You know, your wife's going to leave you. Some men are going to get injured on the job. There's going to be a dust storm. But these are not signs of the end.
Mm.
But that's just how crazy it's gotten that Jesus would have had to expand this list to now to communicate to people today that what they think about the end of the world has nothing to do with what they think it does.
Mm.
Everybody has deceived us.
Yep.
Now, it should not have happened because it's such a straightforward subject here. 1, 2, 3 verses. 1, 2, 3 verses. Mystery over, subject clarified, and then go on. Jesus explained that, there's stop looking for signs. There's not one coming. And these are not signs. All of this, even though they, can be pretty tragic, these are not signs, but an end is not yet. That's what it says after all of that. Mm-hmm. Not that the end is now, but he said, now let me tell you a sign that will indicate that the end is near. This gospel that I'm preaching out here on the mountainsides and around Jerusalem is going to spread throughout the Roman Empire. Even though I'm secluded to the hills and valleys, this message is going to spread to the Okamani. And I forget what verse that is.
Verse 14.
And he said, then once this spreads throughout the Roman Empire, then the end. End of what? Established subject, verse 1, 2, 3. Sometimes I feel like that we live in an alternate universe because this is so clear. This is so simple. There's nothing, nobody should be thinking that Jesus is talking about the end of the planet because the term world here is what in verse 3, Daniel?
Age. Aeon.
It's the aeon. It's this age. What age? The age of the temple. Oh, my 10-year-old learns better than Christians do in church.
Mm.
That is the premise. So we've laid that foundation. We know what end of the world now means. It's the end of the age of the law. This is the sign, and what shall be the sign of thy coming? So there's two things linked together here. The coming of the Lord, whatever that means, and the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So the coming of the Lord, identified by Christianity to be the second coming, has now been tied hard to the end of the temple age.
Mm-hmm.
It is tied hard to the end of the temple age. The signs of the second coming is tied to the end of the temple age.
Yeah.
All right. Daniel, after I've gone through that, and you've been very patient and sat and listened, along with the rest of everybody else. Tell me what this did to you when you saw this for yourself.
The key that unlocked the understanding for me for the very first time was understanding the word world and learning that the word world has several different Greek words, and you will not find the end of the cosmos in the Bible. The end of the cosmos is nowhere in the Bible. That is the created world. You will not find that. You will find the end of the age, and you will find the Roman Empire, what Greek words was that again? Oikoumene.
Yes.
You won't find the end of Oikoumene, but you find out that Oikoumene just means a particular region, specifically spoken in this context about this Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
When you see that, if you're really honest, and now you read through this, the dynamic changes everything.
Yeah.
Because you're not looking for the destruction of the world. You're not looking for a new world, a new created world to come into an existence. Now you're seeing a new age. And we have in the Revelation, and we have a new heaven and a new earth. But what's new about it? It's new in the fact that righteousness dwells in it.
Absolutely.
And so it's not new in the fact that it was destroyed. What was destroyed about it was sin was destroyed. And now righteousness is what's new. And what's new about it is heaven and earth became one instead of being separated. So this whole dynamic changes in not looking for the destruction of the world, as I did. Gosh, Michael, I remember going into the year from 1999, going to a 2000 party, New Year's party with my friend and I. And we spent 2 hours in my bedroom on my knees praying and getting ourselves ready, because everyone was kind of thinking that it quite possibly could be the return of Christ. And we were scared. We were scared that maybe there was some sin that we hadn't confessed. There was something that we missed. And so before we went to that party, we made sure that we got right. And then, Michael, at that party, I secluded myself because I didn't want to think a thought and do something that would cause me to miss the return of Christ. And then as we started approaching midnight, I had this thought, well, what time zone is he coming back in? I live in Central Time, but what if he comes back in Eastern Pacific? Oh, my God.
Maybe he already came and I've been left behind.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. So absolutely everything changed. And understanding these words just in and of itself is a very powerful in understanding the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. Michael, in this chapter, there's a couple other spots I just want a quick spot check before we get to verse 42. In verse 27, it says, "For as lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be." I thought that was interesting because you remember Paul said that in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, we shall be changed. That came to mind when I read that. And then it says in verse 29, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven will be shaken." That's exactly what we saw on the cross. We saw that the sun was turned to dark. We saw the biblical blood moon, if you will. It was a red moon. We saw a great earthquake. All of that happened when Christ died. This whole prophecy that was pushed around this. And then, Michael, the one that you've been talking about lately is right here in verse 34. "Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away until all things take place."
The simplicity of it is just, it's like, Jesus said, don't let anybody deceive you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let any man. I think he knew everybody was going to try to deceive us about this. Yeah. And they have. Mm-hmm. John Hagee has deceived you. All of these guys. I think that Benny Hinn has spoken up and said that he deceived us about the second coming. And so there are people who are waking up and realizing this. Folks, I was not a Bible scholar when I started doing this. I just simply I had my Strong's exhaustive concordance and my Thayer's. So all I had was a handful of books, and they spread out over my bed. And one over here, one down there, one over here, so I could reach and do that. And then suddenly came this thing called computers and programs. And but my template for learning was already set. I just had greater access at greater speeds to the information that I needed, which that's what AI is going to do. It's just going to accelerate all of this beyond imagination. So, see, at this point, we should be able to establish for the entire world and studiers and researchers about the end of the world that they now can stop all research about what will happen after the cross.
Wow.
It means nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It says point blank that Jesus, that generation, would see the fulfillment of all things. Oh, but what about them hurricanes, Mike? What about them earthquakes and hurricanes and famine and all of that? Yeah, it was going on then, still going on now. And that's exactly what Jesus said. But if you want a sign of the end of the temple age, the law, the Psalms, and the prophets, the fulfillment of all of that, it'll be once I've got this message out throughout. Because, see, the law had to be clearly preached in and around Jerusalem, had to be preached for the first time. Now, those of you who are saying, oh, I just live by the teachings of Jesus, well, then you're completely under the law. Because that's what the scriptures say about Jesus's teaching, is that he would bring honor back to God's law.
Yeah.
And to bring honor to it, he had to teach it with clarity. The clarity of the law condemns everybody. If you broke one, you broke them all. In fact, if you keep one, you've broken another one, according to Daniel Thomas Rouse. And I mean, it's amazing. So all of this labored definitions of revelation and folks, the day that you do an abrupt stop in your research and everything you want to know about Christ, about life, about the second coming, about all of that. And if you just do simply an about face and turn and look from the cross back to let there be light, you will know all things. You will know all things about Christ. If you turn and look from the cross forward and try to define these scriptures, you will be deceived.
That's good preaching. You know, one other thing that came to mind as you were talking, the signs of the times. We did that a few weeks ago here on our podcast, and Jesus gave us that specific sign, that it will be as the sign of Jonah.
Yeah.
And he talked about being in the belly of the whale 3 nights. Hello. What is the sign? It's the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus.
In fact, he said that's the only sign that's going to be given to this generation.
Yep.
Not this generation, the generation he was talking to. I feel like we have to clarify that every time.
Yeah.
Because somehow people let everything slip out of position unless you hold it, because they've thought outside these perimeters, and it's not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
It's not us who set these parameters. It is Jesus Christ himself that set the parameters and the clarity as to what the end of the world, and he positioned himself when his second coming would be. So the second coming, again, verse 3, clearly ties the second coming to the end of the age. Now open your Bibles.
So I want to read out of the book of Hebrews, and Apollos writes here about this second coming of Christ. And of course, the Bible translators in the King James really screwed this one up. But if I read in Hebrews chapter 9, I'll start in verse 24. For Christ has not entered the holy place made with hands, which are copy of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Not that he should offer himself often, as the high priest enters the most holy place every year with the blood of another. He then would have to suffer often since the foundation of the world. But now, once at the end of the age, has appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself, and it is appointed for men to die once, but after this comes the judgment. So Christ was offered once to bear the sins of many, and listen to how it puts it, to those who eagerly wait for him, he will appear a second time apart from sin for salvation. It just told us that he appeared apart from sin. It told us that it's appointed unto men to die once, and then comes the judgment. Christ died, then came the judgment of the world. He appeared to take away the sacrifice of himself. And then the translators put in it that to those who eagerly wait, that's not in the Greek.
Oh, really? It's just not even there.
It paints a different picture of those who are totally aware, totally in awe of this second appearing, that he will appear. Not he will appear, but he has appeared a second time apart from sin for salvation.
Just as Apollos just taught.
Yep. So what is the second appearing of Christ? It's when Christ, after he offered himself, he went into the Holy of Holies and offered that, and then he came back. That was the second appearing. And so when Jesus was talking to these people, just a short time before his death, burial, and resurrection, because here we're reading in verse 24 and verse 26, the plot to kill Jesus starts. Yeah. So this is a super short time, and he's saying, this generation, you guys looking at me, you're going to be alive when this happens.
Which was happening within about 24 hours.
Yes, very quickly.
Jesus.
And it took place, and it happened. It's a done deal. So, Michael, I think with that, and I think our GRs have really understood that, we're not waiting for the second coming of Christ. But I've got some questions. I've got some questions about this Matthew chapter 24.
Okay, let me get Al on the phone.
In this, we have this tribulation talk. We have this rapture talk. We've got people being destroyed. It's better for Sodom and Gomorrah. You shouldn't be pregnant in these days because this is going to be a terrible time. We've got like the days of Noah that they were, and I didn't think what was so bad about that. They were eating and drinking and being merry.
Yeah.
Oh no.
They were having church.
Then the other one, Michael, that was a big question to me, and this is what I asked you last night. And this is the two verses right before 42 and 44. If we go to verse 40, it says, "Then two men will be in the field. One will be taken and the other left. Two women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken and the other one left." So if we understand that the return of Christ has already taken place, what do I do with my evangelical teaching that taught me that this is about the rapture? That you'll be at work and one will be left and the other one will be taken. That you'll be cooking dinner and one will be left and the other one will be taken. I mean, this was anyone who's read the Left Behind series or watched the Left Behind movies, you've got this visual about what this would look like. And then, Michael, I, in a step away from that, I studied preterism for a little bit.
Yeah.
And I remember reading in preterism, I think the first book that I read was called Raptureless. I remember the gentleman's first name was John. But in that book, he paints this picture about this is, the Romans coming in. Again, you've already established that it can't be about that because it's about Christ. But this is what they teach, is that the Romans came in and they would take there would be two people standing in the field. They would enslave one, but then leave the other. There'd be two women working at the mill. They would enslave one and leave the other. And so that's kind of how the preterist talked about it. But what is the gospel understanding of this?
Well, number one, Jesus Christ himself has set the parameters in which you must learn about the end of the world and the second coming. You do not have the right to say, oh no, Jesus Christ, Savior of the whole world. We have decided that we are going to let people deceive us. How do you let people deceive you about the second coming and the end of the world? You reject what Jesus said about the second coming and the end of the world. And you allow other people to define that. So whatever we are looking here about these two hippies in a two hippies shall be in a Volkswagen, and two women will be getting a pedicure. That is what it says, right?
Sure, let's go with
it. Okay. That suddenly one's going to disappear. And I can tell you the woman is going to be upset that she didn't get her pedicure finished. And the one that got taken, and the hippies in the bus are going to be more concerned about their Volkswagen bus than anything else. So see, we don't have the right to think about hippies in Volkswagens. We don't have a right to think about women having pedicures. This is about something that was fulfilled by the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. These two people working together and one suddenly taken, and then these two people, others, and you told me that even the term, the two women, that even is not in the Greek, that it's just two people.
Yep, just two people.
Now, why they wanted to lie about that, I don't know. It seems senseless, but somehow that kind of has helped to promote this folly. I did not call this deception. Jesus called it deception. So we have this parameter set by Jesus Christ as to when the second coming is and when the end of the world is. Erase, delete, subtract, get the dynamite out, blow up everything that you were ever taught about this as far as a from the cross forward event. It's not possible. It is not possible unless Jesus Christ himself lied.
Yeah.
It's not possible. So, as we were looking through that, when it talked about the two will be working in the field and two will be grinding flour, goodness gracious, one will be taking one left. So what we did is look at their works. Number one, is it based on works? Well, their works are exactly the same.
Yep.
Both are doing the same job. There is no mention of whether they went home to a concubine or left grinding flour and sold herself as a prostitute or went to the temple to worship. There's no indication of anything except the only choice we have is that these people were doing exactly the same thing. And something outside of their efforts, their works, their performance caused one to be taken and the other left. So we think in gospel terms, then what do we do? Well, in the gospel, who's left and who is taken? But you see, we're still addicted to this end of the world and end times separation. Now, suddenly it popped into my head as we were reading this that Paul had something to say about this, and suddenly you had a verse. Now, that verse that you suddenly saw and the chapter that I suddenly saw as addressing this issue happened to be all in the same chapter.
Mm.
So, lo and behold, what we did is turn back to the chapter that Paul taught extensively on. I cannot find any one of the teachings of Christ of these two lines of the teachings of Christ that Paul himself, and we can prove it to you, Paul was teaching on these verses, and that Paul went into great detail to explain this teaching. So this is Romans chapter 9. Is there anything that you'd like to say up to this point as to how this unfolded on us?
When I had initially asked you about your thoughts on this, you had answered and said, well, I think this would have happened if
Yes.
Christ did not die and raise again.
And we were ready to settle with that and
Yeah.
do a teaching on it.
Yeah, and we had the wheat and the tares, the same thing, that some will be thrown in and some won't, that this judgment would have come. And this is the whole context of 24. We see this over, this pregnant woman, these people who were doing these things. It would be better for them in the day of Sodom and Gomorrah. So we see, as you have said over all the years, we have this on this one track. We have judgment, 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 judgment. But then on the other track of the train, we have peace. And so that's what we've seen, is that in all of this, and of course, the verse that popped in my head is that it will be cut short in righteousness, and which led us to Romans chapter 9.
Yeah. Which is the chapter that was at the same time springing into my head. Now, let's explain the difference between the wheat and the tares and those comparisons that Jesus brought and this particular teaching. The difference is wheat and tares is one thing's good, one thing's bad.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
So all of those others, there was a acknowledgeable difference between the qualifications of one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that is markedly different about that and these other parables and teachings of Christ is that these people are identified as absolute equals. And that something has happened that causes one's result to be drastically different than the others, even though they are, there is no room given to identify that their qualifications for being in one place or the other of this is different from the other.
Mm.
Paul did teach an entire chapter on this subject.
Yeah.
You want to get us started on it?
Sure. So that is Romans chapter 9. And Michael, I think we're just going to take the time and look at the whole chapter, because you got to, because if you don't do it, you're going to miss it. So Romans chapter 9 and verse 1, I tell you the truth in Christ. I'm not lying. My conscience also bearing me witness in the Holy Spirit, that I have great sorrow and continual grief in my heart. For I wish that I myself were accursed from Christ for my brethren, my countrymen according to the flesh, who are Israelites, to whom pertain the adoption, the glory, the covenants, the giving of the law, the service of God, the promise of God, although King James says promises, it's just promise.
Wow.
Of whom are the fathers, and from whom, according to the flesh, Christ came, who is over all, the eternally blessed God. Amen. Verse 6, but it is not that the word of God has taken no effect, for they are not all Israel who are Israel, nor are they all children, because they are the seed of Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
In Isaac your seed shall be called.
Mm-hmm.
That is Those who are children of the flesh, these are not the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted as seed.
Hmm?
For this is the word of promise. At this time I will come, and Sarah will have a son. And not only this, but when Rebekah also has conceived by one man, even by our father Isaac, for the children not yet being born, nor having done any good or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of the works, but of him who calls.
Mm.
It was said to her, the older shall serve the younger. As it is written, Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated.
Wow. Okay, it's time to shut down the Powercast and the teaching. What you've had is Paul addressing the teachings of Jesus about what separates one group from another group. It's none of your business.
None yet.
There is only one. If there is any separation from one group to the other group, it's God who has made the election. For verse 11, for the children being not yet born, that kind of puts you all in the very same level, the same as two out working in the field and two grinding the flour.
Yeah.
For the children being not yet born, or the children both grinding at the mill, or the children both working in the field and grinding the wheat, neither have done any good or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of him that called. That's it.
Yeah.
This people have labored over who's who and what's what. Why have they labored on it? Because they've never known the gospel. That's why they labor over these. Why do they labor over these? Because they let somebody deceive them.
Yeah.
So suddenly it throws these two mentions of two laborers in the field and two grinding the wheat. It places them in a futuristic tense that is not allowed by the context of Matthew chapter 24.
Right.
It simply is not allowed. So now we have Paul explaining a principle here that he thinks is so vitally important. He goes from here after making this clarification about the fact of it is that who did what and what did who and when did why and who got born first and who was usurped the other or whatever happened. It is now completely made clear that this has nothing to do with who did what. This has to do with God making a choice.
Wow. And that gets clearer as we read on. Verse 14, what shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with God? Certainly not. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whomever I will have mercy. I will have compassion on whomever I will have compassion. So then it is not of him who wills, nor of him who runs, but God who shows mercy. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, for this very purpose I have raised you up, that I might show my power in you, and that my name may be declared in all the earth.
Okay. Now let's look at this just a moment. What has Paul just addressed? Paul's addressed what we addressed just a little bit earlier. What shall we say then in verse 14? Is there unrighteousness with God? Can God be unrighteous because his works don't line up with your perception of him?
Ooh.
Is that what you're saying?
Mm.
Yes, according to one of the graduates of Global Grace. Yes, that is what we're saying. That God is unrighteous if he doesn't do this the way I have determined he should have done it.
Mm.
God is not unrighteous. You see, when we lose this major point about the righteousness of God, that yes, God can slaughter thousands and it never make him unrighteous.
Mm.
God could starve 1 billion children to death. Still doesn't make him unrighteous. Because this is where we get the principle of the understanding that our righteousness and our calling is not based in our works. Until you stop judging God, you will not be able to stop judging people.
Wow. I want to bask in that bath for a while.
Man.
Verse 18. Therefore, he has mercy on whom he wills, and whom he wills, he hardens. You will say to me, then, why does he still find fault? For who has resisted the will? But indeed, O man, who are you to reply against God?
God Almighty.
Will the thing formed say to him who formed it, why have you made me like this? Does not the potter have power over the clay, for the same lump to make one vessel for honor and another for dishonor? What if God, wanting to show his wrath and to make his power known, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, that he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy, which he has prepared beforehand for glory?
Now we get an insight here as to why God did it that way. So that we would be able to see mercy. We would be able to see grace. Because you can't know light unless you've seen darkness.
Yeah.
And you can't know the goodness of God unless you've seen the other side of the story. Oh, that's all Moses. That's not God. Well, then please don't ever quote anything from the Hebrew text, because you are the ones who have degraded the Hebrew scriptures. Jesus said, now why did Jesus say, if you don't believe Moses, it's impossible for you to believe me? He clarified that by saying, for he wrote about me. So what was the part of the story that Moses wrote about the Christ? It was the mercy of God. It was the grace of God. How can you see mercy when there was no penalty? How can you see grace when there was no law? This is what God did purposefully, not a mind trick. What a mind trick that he did with the human race. And also remember, do not let your mind slip into forward gear. You must keep your stance in the position that Jesus ascribed for you to understand this, and that Paul has ascribed, that we must keep this stance to understand this. Otherwise, you will be deceived. And that is the fact that all of this, nothing we're talking about happens today. God does not choose between this one and that one and the other one. God does not choose one child to rule over another child. God does not choose Jews over Gentiles. God does not do any of this. The entire painting, with its dark background and its bright surface, is finished. All you have to do is look at it. What if you took the dark background out of a painting? You would see no contrast whatsoever.
Man, I have heard you say that many, many times, but I've never put that in this verse. This is good. That he might make known the riches of his glory. That's why it was done.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Why did he do this with Pharaoh? It was to show his mercy. Mm-hmm. But he had to first choose a man to absolutely assail the people of God. What was it? 490 years they or something like that they were in bondage. And why were they in bondage that long? I got so tickled at Ethan. I'm telling you, he loves the scriptures. He studies the Hebrew scriptures more than Daniel and I both put together. So he was watching a documentary that I suggested that maybe we both should watch, and it was about Moses. And so they had Hebrew scholars on and stuff, and I thought, no, this is going to be good. And so one of the Hebrew scholars spoke up and talks about he was making reference to the day that Moses said, "Let my people go," and everything fell in place, and the river parted, and the Egyptians were drowned, and all of this. And the guy said, "Well, great, God, wonderful," a Hebrew scholar. "But what took you so long?" And Ethan, he got so upset. He said, I think he's an angry old man at 22. And he called and he said, "What are they talking about? Did they not know that is exactly what was prophesied, that these people of Israel, that they would be in bondage for 490 years, that it's exactly what was prophesied? What does he mean, God, what took you so long?" I mean, he was torqued.
Yeah.
And but he had a right to be torqued. And I had never seen that. I'd never seen in my life that 490 years didn't just play out because God was waiting, I'm waiting for him to win my favor. That's not what happened. It was prophesied to be this way. Mm-hmm. For what reason did they go into bondage? So we could know what being free is.
Woo. Wow. So here, Paul talks about Jacob and Esau. He talks about Moses. He talks about Pharaoh. But then in verse 4, he says, "But even us whom he called, not of the Jews only, but also of the Gentiles." Verse 25. And here's what I love, Michael, because now Paul's going to start quoting the Hebrew scriptures. So he's talked about the Hebrew characters. Now he's going to start quoting the prophets.
So you were in verse 24, not 4.
Yeah. Did I say 4?
Okay.
24. Yeah. Verse 25. And he says also in Hosea, "I will call them my people who were not my people."
Wow.
"And her beloved who was not beloved."
Yeah. None your business.
"And it shall come to pass in the place where it was said to them, 'You are not my people,' there they shall be called the sons of the living God." Ooh, that one gives me goosebumps.
Oh, dear Lord.
And then Isaiah cries out concerning Israel, "Though the number of the children of Israel be as the sand of the sea, the remnant will be saved."
Well, wonder what that remnant is.
For he. Is that
what?
the remnant?
The remnant is a what?
He. "For he will finish the work and cut it short in righteousness, because the Lord will make a short work upon the earth."
Wow. This was my first insight into chapter 9. Was these verses. And I remember last night I was sharing this with Daniel. I read a remnant, and we've talked about the remnant until the remnant remanted, I think. And all these years, the remnant. Who's the remnant? Who's the remnant? Wonder who the remnant is. I think we're the remnant. Let's start a church and meet in the woods for the next 40 years and be the remnant. The Mormons are the remnant, and everybody's been the remnant. But if you go back to Isaiah 28, you will see who the remnant is. And so when I found this, I thought, well, what is a remnant? And I looked up the word remnant, and the term is not an absolute term. It depends on context, and the term remnant can mean any number from 1 to any point. It just has to mean that is a part of a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere from 1. 1 can be a remnant. You see, what we got lied to about is a remnant is a group. And when they lied to us and told us a remnant is a group, we now have 46,000 denominations who think they are the remnant. And but turns out this remnant would finish the work and cut it short in righteousness.
Mm.
And when you take all of the history from Let There Be Light up to the cross, I think that 3 days on the cross are 3 days from the death, burial, and resurrection. The trial, the death, the burial, and resurrection. I think that's a pretty short damn work.
Yeah. Yeah.
To take everything from one state of being into a completely different state of being. To take God himself and unite him to man and unite himself to God. To take every human and unite them to each other. To take heaven and unite it to earth. To take angels and unite them with this new creation. 3 days? You show me something that great. It took God 6 days to create everything. But this new creation was even more profound in its results than the 6 days of creation. Jesus halved the time of creation and completed the new creation in 3 days.
Mm.
So from 6 to 3, I'd say that's cut short.
Yeah. And what if it had not been cut short? What if there was not a seed? Verse 29, and as Isaiah has said before, unless the Lord of the Sabbath had left us a seed, we would have become like Sodom. We would have become like Gomorrah.
We would have been judged.
Which answers my question about these judgments in Matthew, in Luke, and in these other places. If it wasn't for the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, that was our end. Our end was that judgment. Our end was
absolutely
the wheat and the tares. Our end was all of that, but that was cut short. And what was it cut short in? It was cut short in righteousness.
Gosh.
Mm.
Amazing.
What shall we say then? That the Gentiles who did not pursue righteousness have obtained the righteousness, even the righteousness of faith? So that one man standing in the field that wasn't an Israelite, but Israel pursuing the law of righteousness have not obtained to the law of righteousness, so that other man was left standing? Why? Because they did not seek it by faith, but as it were by the works of the law. For they stumbled at the stumbling stone, as it is written, behold, I lay in Zion a stumbling stone and a rock of offense, and whoever believes on him will not be put to shame.
You see, the very moment that a Bible teacher, a church, a pastor, they call themselves prophets and everything else, started trying to figure out the difference between these two laborers and the difference between these two grinders of the wheat. That is the moment that, wherefore, because they sought it not by faith, but as it is written, the works of the law, for they stumbled at the stumbling stone. The moment you started trying to figure out what the difference is between these two, you were stumbling at the stumbling stone.
Yeah.
You stumbled.
Mm-hmm.
You were deceived.
Yeah.
Because it requires that. Why wouldn't we listen to Jesus? And I can tell you that all these guys that teach these aforementioned things, they give a very tepid qualification to what the work of the cross actually accomplished.
Mm.
But you listen to the behind the screen, and Jesus just wasn't all that necessary.
I'm just thinking about chapter 10 now. As we go into chapter 10, he now talks about this personal choice to believe and how that was being taught, that if you confess with your heart and believe with your mouth.
Yeah.
Well, I said that wrong. Believe in your heart and confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus, then you shall be saved. But then he goes against that. And it's all summed up here in verse 20 of chapter 10. I was found by those who did not seek me.
Yeah.
I was made manifest to those who did not ask for me. Why did that happen? Because the potter said to the clay, this is what I want you to be.
Yeah. Excellent observation. Chapter 9 clarifies chapter 10 before you ever get there. And just in case you get mixed up, the last 3 verses of chapter 10 tie you directly back to this stumbling stone, the thing that was causing them to stumble. You see, having to believe and in your heart and confess with your mouth is a clear indication that you have stumbled at the stumbling stone.
Now, and then Michael, chapter 11, he starts talking to the people who think they have faith, that as if their faith was something better than Israel. And I just love this. He's dealing with both people here. He's saying, okay, Israel, here's your thing that you think you're all something special. Those of you Gentiles who believe and you think you're something special. But let me just tell you this. He concluded you all in unbelief.
Yeah.
That he might have mercy upon them all.
Holy God. The concept of this, and they mock, they delete, they block, they mock, they delete, they block, they mock, they delete, they block, all of the time. They will not carry out a discussion about this because they can't answer the questions. You simply must accept this paradigm, and if you don't, then we cannot talk, we cannot think, because you're interrupting our train of thought that we have shoehorned ourselves into. Now, we read the prophecy that they all might become the sons of God. Don't tell me everybody was a son of God before the cross. When Jesus was describing his relationship with his Father, it was with his Father, not theirs.
Yeah.
The Father only had one Son at that time, and the Son only had one Father. But the destination was that the Father would be the Father of all. That's what this says, point blank. That would be by not figuring out why one got taken and one got left. It's God that made the decisions, folks. And as Don Bartlett used to say to me all the time, I just got to the point where he irritated me, and he said, there was no plan B. And so finally, I agreed, I tout myself as an open-minded man, and Don is very persuaded of this. He has not been, believe me, Don could be very direct about things, but with this, he was never pushy about this. He just simply would state it about plan B. And so I was able to leave it alone, and he left it alone until I decided I don't want to leave this alone anymore. I've got to get this old man straightened out. He was 11 months older than me. So he did this just so that I could be older than him now. I know this man, I'm telling you. So he came down, and I've mentioned this before, and I just want you to understand that learning is just learning is a process of being wrong. And it's the very same thing as with this comparisons that Paul has given us Paul taught about this directly from Jesus. Let me finish that. And after I was there, Don sat there and smiled. I was convinced I had convinced him of God had to, that things went wrong, and God had to then start the plan of salvation after, quote, the fall. I thought we'd totally agreed. And then months later, I'm simply reading Romans chapter 8. And Paul goes into several verses declaring the power of the fact that Adam was born corrupt, and that subject to corruption, and it was done for a reason. It was by necessity. And for some reason, after reading that verse all these years, suddenly that verse, I saw it. And it's like there was no plan B. Holy God, there was no plan B. Adam's corruption was predestined. It was planned out before God ever said, "Let there be light." And it just simplified things so very much, and I've appreciated that. If Don Bartlett's life was only to help the gospel revolution to clarify that point, what a powerful impact he has made upon our lives. And I do mention it, and I'm not as reticent about being wrong as he was, even though he handled me declaring him to be wrong quite well. And then when I came around, he didn't do the dance the jig and say, "Told you so, told you so." I think he wanted to, though.
He may have done it when you weren't around.
He did it the minute that camera went off. Laura, guess what? The idiot finally came around. So do we have anything in these Matthew verses that would tie directly to Romans?
Oh, yes. Matthew chapter 24. And
so we're still in chapter 24.
Yep. And if we just back to, I'll start reading in verse 19. But woe to those who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. And pray that your flight may not be in winter or on the Sabbath. For then there will be a great tribulation, such as not has been since the beginning of the world until this time. No, nor even shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh will be saved.
My goodness.
But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened.
And I think Paul read that, heard that, and realized what Jesus was talking about. And he wrote an entire chapter in Romans to make sure people understood it.
Now, Michael, as we were talking, I'll take that and I'll raise it another, because as I started thinking about chapter 10, remember the paradigm in which you showed us to work within is that the gospel of the kingdom might be preached in all of this region.
Yeah.
And the witnesses to all generations. Remember chapter 10, he says, has their sound not gone out to the ends of the world? And so Paul even extends that part of that teaching even into chapter 10 of Romans.
Isn't that amazing? So yes, that's also the term oikomene. And he affirms that, yes, this gospel being preached to all the world, as is, well, we got to get missionaries out there because Jesus ain't coming back until the gospel's preached to all the world. True statement, wrong paradigm.
Yeah.
And Paul acknowledged, yep, you're right. And this gospel was preached throughout the world. The term world is used. The term is oikomene.
Wow. Michael, another example of having the right question. And my question to you was, what about these two standing in the field? And my goodness, did a powerful answer come?
And I did not have the answer.
Mm.
My first answer to you was the go-to of this is the way it would have been had. And that was a satisfiable answer. I remember your reaction. And then just suddenly, both of us, it happened almost simultaneously, the best I can remember. Romans.
Mm-hmm.
My God.
Yeah.
Paul taught on this in Romans.
Yeah.
So, folks, we did not hype this up too much at the beginning of this. This is powerful.
Yeah.
This is worth everything. The clarification of these two terms tied together by Christ himself, the end of the age and the second coming.
Mm-hmm.
And the deception that Jesus warned about. Anybody that takes this past the death, burial, and resurrection, they are deceiving you.
Yeah. And so it is, we must leave you, family and friends. If you'd like to know anything about the Gospel Revolution, then call our office on
832-318-9339.
Or call Jeff to make that pledge at 321-220-4373. Or you can also go to www.gospelrevolution.com and hit the donate button. You can find us on your favorite social media network, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Please be sure to hit that subscribe, share, and like button on whatever platform you are listening. Now it's good night from Daniel Rouse in the frozen tundra.
And it is good night from Michael Williams right here in Clarksville, Tennessee. Guys, I don't know what to say to you anymore. The gospel has overpowered our lives. I don't know how else to put it. The gospel has overpowered our lives. It is rearranging the way we think. It has never dictated to us what to think.
Mm.
One of the greatest joys I've ever had is sharing with my grandson that his thoughts are not evil, no matter what they are. And that his thoughts do not determine his character. And we got to go through and think about what some of those thoughts are. We were able to go to a level of honesty because I suffered from this, folks. I suffered from this so badly that what was going through my head was my identity and what God thought about me. So at his age of 10 years old, he knows that his thoughts are just thoughts. They are not his character. I just, what do we do? We just say thank you. I would have stayed with the gospel all of these years. I did burn the bottoms of my feet preaching gospel. In my dream, it was cold. I'm not sure which one is better than the other. I guess we let God decide, right? We do love you guys. And with everything that we understand love to be, we are strongly affectioned toward you. And I know you toward us because we absolutely are able to experience that on a daily basis. And thank you so very much.
We sure hope that you enjoyed today's Powercast. And remember, is it possible that we can come back next week and do it all over again just a little bit better?
Since you're knocking on the door, you're begging to come in, yeah. Unaware that all the while love's been knocking from within. You are the love you seek, a perfect yet unique, righteous, holy. Yeah. When you feel lost and alone, staring at the unknown, and these words be the compass that guides you right home. We are one, we you gotta be nothing to complete. It's not a thing that you need, you're the love. Just remember to breathe and take a second off. Look, I'm just trying to remind you that you're perfectly divine, flawlessly designed. When you're lost and alone, staring at the unknown, let these words be the compass that guides us back home. We are one, we are love, we are one. Yeah, yeah. We are love.
Deconstructing religion and barbecuing the sacred cows of Christianity before your very eyes. You are listening to
The Gospel Revolution.